Today we're going to create a looping jump cycle for our lamp. The final result will look something like this, just a simple hop cycle that shows locomotion. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I've got a blank scene here. Let's go ahead and reference in our character. We'll go to File, Create Reference. We'll find our lamp rig. We'll zoom out a little bit. Okay, we're all set to go. By default, it's going to make a namespace on your lamp rig that's a little bit longer. So if you go to your reference editor, bring that up, we'll just type rig. That'll make it easier to see things over here in your outliner. Once this is done, we'll create a ground plane. So let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and Plane. We'll scale it up to about 1,000, and then we'll zoom back out. So we're going to start by establishing our key poses. It's going to be pretty easy. There's not going to be very many of them. We'll be working in both the perspective and the side view. That'll be the easiest way to do that. So let's open up our all keyable set. We'll select our root, and we're going to start with what's called the landing pose. So in a walk cycle, this would be where the heel is hitting the ground. Now we have a very simple lamp rig here. The head is driven by IK, but that's nested under the root. So we're going to do a little bit of counter animating. We'll start with the pose where the base of the lamp is about to hit the ground plane. So let's go ahead and move that up. We just want the back of our ground here, or our base, to go ahead and be hitting the ground. We'll take our head control, we're going to move it down, and we're going to point the head a little bit upwards. So we'll just start with this as a reference pose. We can adjust this when we go into the loop. Make sure that you're set on 30 frames a second. We'll set our frame extents to be 0 and 40. And then we'll just select all of our keyable controls and we'll hit S. Okay, now we're going to go to frame 10. Frame 10 is going to be what's called the passing pose. In a walk cycle, this would be where the back foot is dragging past the front foot, but in this, it's just going to be basically the neutral center pose where our character is grounded. So we're going to zero out all of our root controls, and then we're going to take our head and we're going to go ahead and move it down. We're going to pitch the head forward like this, and then we'll select all of our keyable controls and we'll hit S. Now we're going to go to the back frame. That's going to be where the character is pushing off from the ground. So let's go ahead and push our root back. We'll pitch it forward, rotate it forward in the X, and then we'll move it up. This is going to be like where you're in a walk cycle where you're pushing off the toe. Okay, and we're going to have our character here. This is going to be pushed off. We're going to extend our arm like the character is going to be pushing off of the ground. And then we'll just move our root back just a little bit. Okay, so let's just run through our poses so far. Okay, this is looking pretty good. We're going to add some breakdown poses in there later, which will make it look even better. We'll just select all of our keyable controls, and we'll hit S. Now we're going to go to frame 30. This is going to be the pose where the character is in the air, so we'll just zero out all of our root controls. We'll bring this up, and then we're going to take our head, we're going to pitch it down, and point our head down like this. Now, the head's going to collapse onto the body at the very top of the motion, but we'll fix that in one of the breakdown poses. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see how that looks. Good, so our character is coming up. And then the last pose is going to be a duplicate of our first pose. So let's go ahead and middle mouse drag from frame 0 and hit S. So now if we see, we should see all of our characters flying forward. And let's just make sure that we zero out the Z translation for our root. So now our character is going to be landing right there. So if we play through, we'll see that we have a very basic loop of the cycle, but it gives us some good poses to work with. Let's go ahead and select all of our keys. We'll just make sure that we have all of our keys set at both the beginning and the end. And then let's just play around with the timing just a little bit. So this is going to be a little bit faster. So let's go ahead and take all of our keys. We'll select all by clicking Shift and dragging in the timeline. And then we're going to move them down to about 32. This will make the math work pretty nicely because it divides pretty evenly here. So then we'll just go ahead and snap this and set our frame extents to 32. Okay, so now that we've established our key poses, we'll go ahead and add a couple of additional poses, breakdown poses that will help us to sell this motion. These can be considered sort of secondary key poses, but we'll just go ahead and make sure that we're still working in pose to pose. Here at frame 3, I'm going to take my root and I'm going to just go ahead and zero out the rotations in the X, and then I'm going to zero out the translates in the Y. That means that it's going to slap down So when this happens, because we have a simple rig and our neck is sort of parented under the base, we're going to go ahead and counter animate that by pushing our head backwards and pushing it up. Okay, so now when our character lands like this, you can see that the neck is sort of compensating. And then here at frame 5, we're going to go ahead and take our neck and move it down. Now we're not setting keys on all of the keyable controls again because this is a breakdown pose, so it's not another key pose. We don't need to worry about that. This is going to give us that weight, the absorption. So here you see the character is kind of coming down. The other thing you can do is you can pitch the head up a little bit like this, and you can then push the head down a little bit more in the passing pose, and that'll give the character a good amount of weight. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Next thing we want to do is we want to go here to frame 12. Again, we're going to zero out the base. So we're going to zero out the rotates in the X and the translates in the Y. We're going to take our head and we're going to push it down. And then we're going to angle our head down even a little bit more. We want to make this to look like the character is sort of building up to a jump. Here, this push off is going to be what generates the momentum for him to push off and up into the jump. So we're going to actually take this and we're going to make this a little bit quicker. So let's take this frame, which is currently at 16. We're just going to push that back a frame. And then here at frame 13, we're going to make sure that we zero out the base again, rotate and translate. Oops, sorry, not translate in the Z, translate in the Y. All right, so now our character really looks like they're generating a lot of force in the motion. Let's go ahead and in this pose, we're going to alter this a little bit. We're going to push this down and just make it so that he looks like he's still pushing off and generating that force. And we'll push the head back a little bit like this. Good. And then here in frame 18, we're going to add a little bit more extension to the neck. And then we're going to point the head up. So this is really him forcing the base off of the ground like this. And then you can see that that's a good contrast between what we see in our apex pose. The apex pose is where the character is at the very top of the jump. And it gives the character kind of a glide. It's the point at which there's no upward and no downward motion. It's sort of at the very, very top. Okay, so the last pose that we're going to need is right here. We can see that the character kind of pitches back a little bit and the head is sort of still sticking in its place up at the top. So we want to push the head up just a little bit, and then we want to move the root forward just a little bit. We're going to angle it back so that we get a nice kind of contrast from the glide. And then what I'm noticing is that this landing pose is a little bit too far back. So let's go ahead and push that forward a little bit, and we'll copy that to frame 0. So let's just go ahead and play through that. Okay, that's looking good. We're getting some stalling between the frame loop, and that's pretty typical because this last pose is very, very close to or is a little bit far from the glide pose. So let's go ahead and select all keyable. And then we're just going to take this, we're going to move it back to frame 30, and we're going to bracket the jump to 30 frames. The last thing we want to do is we want to open up our graph editor. So let's go ahead into our graph editor. So because this last pose, the looping pose, is going to be a very sudden movement, let's just go ahead and make the tangents for this linear. So we'll right click on the key, we'll go to tangents and linear, and here at the end we'll go to tangents and linear. So let's see if that loops a little bit better. Yep, so that seems to be looping quite a bit better. Let's look at it from the perspective window and see what we got. Okay, so this is like a pretty good starting point. This is going to be our first pass animation. You can see that we've gone a little bit further than pose to pose. We've added some breakdown poses. Now what we need to do is we need to add a couple of additional elements, a little bit of refinement, and we'll go ahead and push this to polish. One of those is going to be here in the jump animation. We want to select all of our keyable controls, and anything between here and the landing pose, we want to make spline. So let's just go ahead and select those. We'll go here to tangents and we'll make that spline. So now you can see you get a little bit of extra extension in the jump. The head also right here is sort of collapsing and not, it doesn't look like it's really following that well. So let's go ahead and right here, let's push this back a little bit. And then as he's pushing that forward, let's just go ahead and leave the head at the very top of the jump. Okay, so right here, I also want to add a little bit of additional rotation to that. And then we're going to land. The character's going to land a little bit more. So this is looking pretty good. Let's just go ahead and play through it. Good, we can add even a little bit more extension to the neck. So right here in the push-off pose, let's go ahead and add one frame where the neck is nearly straight. We want to be sure that we guard against it snapping, but we definitely want it to get nearly straight to allow it to look like there's a lot of momentum going on here. So you can see that that looks a little bit more explosive. It's looking pretty good. So the last thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of a foot roll or a foot flap to our base. You can see I've added this extra control here, which allows me to rotate the base independently of the main base or root control. This base or base control here would be considered our root in a character, but because it's a lamp, the root is at the ground. So let's just go ahead, and what we want to do is we want to add it right in here. You can see that I'm getting a little bit of cutting through the ground. So I can go right here and I can select this control and I can pitch it forward, make sure that we're not getting any extra. But I have to counter animate that, make sure that it is straight on the ground on frame 13. So at frame 14, animating it forward just a little bit. And then as the character pushes off the ground, I actually want to push this back. This is going to be like the foot in a walk cycle pushing off the ground and pushing that weight forward. Then as our character comes up, let's make sure here at frame 24 that we get it back to about 0. It doesn't have to be exactly 0. You can leave it about 5. And then right when the character is about to hit the ground, let's just go ahead and pitch it forward. So this gives us a little bit of extra swing on the base, and it gives us a nice little push off to show the weight of the end momentum of that push off. Okay, so this is a pretty good example of a simple walk cycle using our lamp rig. If you have any questions, let me know.